Alright, so let me start by saying this is one of the weirdest stories I've ever lived through. And if I hadn't been the one in the middle of it, I'd probably think it was some ridiculous plot for a soap opera. But no, this is my life. A few years ago, I was dating this girl. We'd been together for a while, and I thought things were going great. I was 25, she was 24, and we were living together, happy and in love, or so I thought. We even got engaged, made plans, talked about our future. Everything was moving in the right direction, and I genuinely thought she was the one. I was wrong. So wrong. It all started the night of a New Year's Eve party. I was still recovering from a rough week, working long hours and trying to keep everything in check. I had to stay home that night to catch up on sleep, but she went out with her friends. A few of her close friends were there, and they were planning to hang out for the night, so I didn't think anything of it. I figured I'd be left alone for the evening, just catching up on some rest. So, as the night went on, I stayed home, zonked out on the couch, thinking I was just going to sleep through the celebrations. But a few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from her. She told me she was having a good time at the party, and I just figured she'd be coming home soon. But the weird thing was, she didn't mention anything about who was there, about who she was with, or anything else. It was just a generic message, nothing unusual. I still wasn't suspicious, but I started feeling that nagging little feeling you get when something isn't quite right. When I finally decided to get up and head to the party, thinking I'd join them for the last bit of the night, I showed up to the scene to find that something was definitely off. I walked into the living room, and immediately I noticed the vibe. She was hanging out with one of her best friend's husbands, a guy I barely knew. They were playing cornhole, but here's the thing, he was getting way too touchy with her. Not just the casual kind of touch you might expect in a friendly game, but full-on ass grabs. Yeah, you read that right. Ass grabs. I stood there for a second, just trying to process what I was seeing. Was I just imagining this? Was I overreacting? Maybe it was nothing. But I wasn't imagining it. I saw her laughing it off, clearly enjoying the attention, and he was all up in her space, doing things I wouldn't expect anyone to do in front of others, let alone the fiancée. He was being super obvious about it too. I wasn't angry at first. I just felt weird. It didn't sit right with me, and the more I watched, the more I realized something wasn't normal. No one else at the party seemed to care, and I didn't know if that made things better or worse. I brushed it off, at least for the moment. It was New Year's Eve. Maybe I was reading into things too much, right? But then, I walked into the room and saw a girl giving me this strange look. I can't even describe it. It wasn't judgmental, just this odd look like she knew something I didn't. When my girlfriend introduced me to her, it felt awkward. This girl didn't say anything, but the way she looked at me made me question everything. Why the weird look? Was it just me being paranoid? Probably. But I couldn't stop the feeling gnawing at the back of my mind. Fast forward 2 days. The weird vibe from the party was still stuck in my head, but I was trying to let it go. I went on a fishing trip with my buddy for a couple of days to clear my head, escape the city for a bit, and reset. I figured I'd leave whatever had been bothering me behind and enjoy some peace and quiet. What a joke that turned out to be. While I was out fishing, she had been at his place. And you probably know where this is going, but I didn't find out until later. She had gone to his house, and while I was out of town, she slept with him. I found out about it when I returned, still trying to shake the stress of the past few days, only to find that the whole thing had gone from weird to full-blown messed up. We both came down with COVID that week. I guess the universe was just rubbing salt in the wound at that point. It felt like everything in my life was falling apart, and I couldn't do anything about it. The relationship, which had seemed so solid just days before, was now hanging by a thread, and I hadn't even fully processed what had happened yet. I was too caught up in trying to focus on healing and getting through the sickness. But the more I thought about it, the more it all clicked. My mind started to spiral. She was acting distant and cold with me, more so than usual, and I was in denial, thinking maybe it was just because of the illness, or maybe stress from the holidays. But deep down, I knew something was off. I just hadn't known how deep the lie went. And that's when I started to piece together what had really been happening behind my back. It was like I could finally see the truth, even if it hurt. She had been with him. She had cheated on me, and I had no idea how to face it. I didn't know what to do, and part of me just wanted to ignore it. I wanted to believe that maybe I was being paranoid, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed for good. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and maybe, how would you feel if your partner hid their affair for months or even years? Write in the comments. I wasn't the person I thought I was either. So here's where things get even messier, and honestly, I still can't wrap my head around how it all unfolded. I was stuck in this bizarre situation where nothing made sense anymore, and I couldn't even trust my own instincts anymore. Like, I knew she was lying, but the whole thing felt like a twisted game that I couldn't get out of. It's hard to explain, but everything felt like I was being manipulated by everyone around me. I kept telling myself it couldn't get worse, but of course it did. So, I'm on the third day of quarantining with her. Yep, just the two of us, stuck together with COVID, and this is when the truth finally started to come out. She had been distant with me the whole time, but now it was unbearable. I was still processing what had happened, but I was forced to sit in the same space with her, pretending like everything was okay. To make matters worse, she seemed to act like nothing had happened. The level of emotional disconnect was insane, and I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, her best friend calls her. Now, this best friend had been involved in everything. The same best friend who had been egging on the whole situation at the party. The one who had seen her grinding with that guy and didn't say a word. The same one who had encouraged my ex to let that guy grab her ass in front of everyone. The same friend who had known everything and still acted like nothing was wrong. This friend called her up, and I overheard the conversation. Honestly, I wasn't even trying to listen, but the moment I heard my ex's best friend say, "You have to tell him, or I'm sending him an anonymous letter about everything," it was like a punch to the stomach. My heart sank. She was giving her an ultimatum. Tell me the truth, or she was going to go public with it. And I swear, for a moment, I thought I was going to lose my mind. How many lies had I been living? How many layers of deception were there? She had been caught in the act, yet this best friend was now forcing her to come clean. After the phone call, everything shifted. The next morning, she finally admitted it. She couldn't hide it anymore, not with the pressure of what was about to happen. So she tells me. She admits that she had been seeing him the whole time, that she had been sleeping with him behind my back. But here's the kicker. As if the situation wasn't messed up enough already, she didn't even try to be remorseful. She didn't even offer a genuine apology. Instead, she says, "I was bored. You weren't really giving me what I needed, and he was there. It just happened. I didn't think it would get this bad." Like, as if that made it okay. And it didn't stop there. No, not even close. This same best friend, the one who had encouraged everything from the start, the one who had been her accomplice in making this mess, was also the one who had pushed her to go out drinking and then allowed my ex to drive drunk, to hook up with her husband's best friend. That best friend's husband was sober, and yet she let my ex drive to have sex with him. Like, seriously? How much more could one person take? The whole thing was just getting out of hand. The webs of lies were so tangled now that I didn't know what was real anymore. The worst part was that this friend, this person who had basically encouraged my ex to cheat, who had been enabling all of this, was now acting like she was doing the right thing by giving my ex the ultimatum to tell me. It was as if she was trying to absolve herself of any guilt, as if she could wash her hands of it all by making sure the truth came out. But the truth was already so tainted that it didn't even matter anymore. It wasn't going to fix anything. The thing that hurt the most wasn't just the cheating. It was the fact that these two people, the person I had trusted and the person who was supposed to be her best friend, had both been part of this sick, twisted narrative. It was the fact that they had been planning behind my back for so long, and no one ever thought to say anything. So I sit there, processing all of this, realizing that this whole thing had been a lie from the start. She had been playing a game with me, and so had her best friend. It was like they were playing me for a fool the entire time, knowing I'd never find out. But here I was, with the truth shoved in my face, and there was no escaping it. I wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she had been unfaithful, or the fact that I had been living in this sick, fabricated version of reality where I thought everything was fine. At the end of the day, I made the choice to walk away from all of it. I couldn't stay with someone who didn't value me, who didn't see me as worthy of honesty and respect. I wasn't about to waste any more time on a relationship built on lies. I left, and the weight that lifted off my shoulders that day was indescribable. The whole ordeal was a nightmare, but in the end, it was the best decision I could have made for myself. And as for her, well, she stayed with that friend who had played such a big part in all of this. They got what they wanted, my trust shattered, my heart broken, but the truth was, I was better off without them. I moved on, and as much as I'll always remember how bad it hurt, I knew deep down that this was a chapter one needed to close. The same trashy ex I never liked and tried to get my ex away from. After the cheating, I stupidly tried to make it work. I gave her an ultimatum: either cut ties with the best friend or I'm gone. She refused. Honestly, the nerve of it. I couldn't believe it. She actually refused to end a friendship with a person who had been complicit in the whole thing, the person who had literally pushed her into that situation in the first place, the person who had watched her cheat and done nothing to stop it. Her excuse? That the best friend was too important, that cutting ties with her would be like cutting ties with a part of herself. It was almost laughable, but I was too heartbroken to even laugh. In that moment, I realized just how much of a fool I had been. She didn't care enough about us to make that sacrifice. She wasn't going to choose me over someone who had encouraged her bad behavior and kept the lies going. I was just another option, another guy in the mix, and I didn't mean enough for her to fight for us. Our couples therapist, yeah, I was still seeing one, because I thought it could help, actually sided with her. She said that my ex shouldn't have to cut ties with her best friend just because of what happened. That I was being unreasonable. That the best friend wasn't the real problem. I was beyond frustrated. Here I was, trying to work through the real issue, her cheating, her lies, and they were telling me to just accept it. Move on, they said. But I couldn't just move on from something like this. I couldn't just act like she hadn't completely shattered my trust and that nothing had happened. It wasn't a small mistake. This was betrayal on every level. And yet, everyone seemed to think I was the one who needed to just let it go. That should have been my sign to leave. But I stupidly kept holding on. Because love, right? You fight for it, you try to fix it, even when it's broken beyond repair. But then came another gut punch. Out of nowhere, a guy from a few years back, someone she had slept with during one of our breaks, texted her. Conveniently, he was at a bar across the street from where we were. I don't know if I can describe the feeling of finding out about that. I had already been emotionally wrecked, dealing with everything else but this. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. She didn't even try to hide it. She didn't pretend it wasn't happening. She told me about it like it was no big deal, like it was casual. Like, oh yeah, I'm just catching up with him for old time's sake. I mean, come on. How do you even explain something like that? How do you explain texting your ex while you're still with someone? While you've just made me feel like shit for wanting to work things out. At that point, I was done. I didn't even have to say anything anymore. I walked out. I didn't need her to tell me that she loved me or that she was sorry. I had already heard those empty words too many times. There was nothing left to say. I was so tired of the lies, the excuses, the betrayal. I had tried to save something that wasn't even worth saving. But then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she went on Facebook. She posted something that made my blood boil. She posted that, "I never cheated on him. You can literally ask my best friend." And guess who commented on that post? Her best friend, the same one who had been enabling everything, agreeing with her. It was like a slap in the face. They were both sitting there, acting like everything was fine, like I was the one in the wrong for being hurt. It was the final straw. I had already been dealing with all the hurt and confusion, but this was the ultimate disrespect. They were both trying to rewrite the narrative, to act like I was just some crazy person who didn't understand what had happened. But the truth was staring them in the face, and they were both too deluded to admit it. I finally realized something that I should have understood from the beginning. I was never going to get the closure I wanted from her. I was never going to get the honesty, the apology, or the respect that I deserved. She wasn't the person I thought she was. And, honestly, her best friend wasn't any better. They were both part of this toxic mess, and I was just a bystander in a game I hadn't even agreed to play. I ended it. For good this time. I didn't want to be part of her twisted narrative anymore. I didn't want to be used, manipulated, and lied to. I deserved someone who respected me, someone who wasn't playing games with my heart. Since then, things have been much better. I've moved on, slowly but surely. I've learned that you can't force a relationship to work when the foundation is built on lies. You can't change someone who isn't willing to change for you. And while it hurt like hell to walk away, I'm better off now than I was back then. I've learned to trust myself again and to never settle for anything less than what I deserve. And her? Well, I don't know what happened to her after all that. I don't care anymore. I've moved on from the whole mess, and now I'm just focusing on myself. Sometimes you have to walk away from a toxic situation to realize your own worth.